you can start recording. Thank you. So let me give you a couple of instructions, but first, Peter, did you want to open up the call?
I will be happy to do so, Maxim. Thank you very much for, first of all, to you directly for accepting our invitation to host this webinar and to share your experience with our members. Mostly thanks to those who managed to go. We welcome you on behalf of AmCham Slovakia to today's webinar, whatever you name it. Yep, so same thing, just the form is different. We will be continuing in the AmCham series of webinars prepared for our members in order to somehow mitigate the negative effects of Corona crisis, given the fact that we cannot meet physically in a room, in some kind of nice meeting room. So thank you very much, Maxim, for hosting this seminar entitled "Managing Remote Teams in Times of COVID-19." We will be focusing today on effective ways how to manage your team on remote, how to stay effective during these complicated times, and how to preserve your productivity and engagement together with your teammates during the time that we cannot come back to our offices. As Maxim said, the webinar will be and already is recorded and will be consequently shared after the end of the webinar. It will be shared on AmCham webpage, where it will be available for AmCham members to be watched. With no further ado, I see the connection is working. We all can hear you. Maxim can see you. The slides are quite nice as well, quite nicely visible. And let's go on, I guess. The floor is yours, Maxim.
Thank you. So technical aspects. Yeah, we're not doing this through Zoom. We're doing this through WebEx. If you have a question, please write into the chat, just the same way it says here, I cannot hear you both on laptop nor on iPad. Does anyone else have the same issue? Zuzka, if you can please help, or Peter, if you can help.
Yeah, we will
type with thumb.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so if you have questions, type in the questions in chat. I have the presentation organized into separate into several parts, and after each part, I will pause and ask you if you have questions. And Peter has been appointed or volunteered or voluntold to be our host for the questions. So he will be looking at the chat, and if there are questions, he will let us know. My job here is to share something with you that we've been teaching in Lenovo for many years, and that is practical technical techniques for making sure that remote management works well. Except that, of course, this is a strange situation now, because all of a sudden we are all remote, right? We are remote managers, we have remote employees, everybody has been remote, and it's a strange situation. So I've adjusted the content to be, in some cases, a lot more specific for the Corona situation. My name is Maxim Strashin. I'm from Canada. I was born in St. Petersburg. When I was young, we immigrated to Canada, and then after that, after I finished university, I moved to Czech Republic, initially for 6 months, to work at a Maastricht University, and then 6 months turned into 8 years. I moved from Brno to Prague. I did management development. I did management training at the universities and for consulting companies. And then I had one very good client, and that was Lenovo, and they were in Slovakia, and I was traveling to Bratislava, and said, why don't you stop traveling to Bratislava and move to Slovakia and take care of the site for L&D, learning and development needs. I said, great, moved here, and that was 11 years ago. So it's been a while since I've been living in, let's call it Central Europe or Czechoslovakia. People keep obviously asking, you must have a Slovak wife. My wife is from Germany. We have 2 small kids. We live here because we like living here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And we find actually Slovakia is a great place to live. And right now I'm calling in from a cottage that we've rented close to Piešťany, as you can see from the really cool retro 70s furniture behind, because with 2 small kids in Bratislava, where all of the playgrounds were closed up until today, it's a little bit more difficult. So we're trying to find out how do we cope with this Corona thing, just like everybody else. My job used to be taking care of learning and development at the site. We had about 750 people at that time. Then I started taking care of learning and development, mostly for management development and pre-executive development, executive development for EMEA. Then I started taking care of a bit more things also on the worldwide level. And now, about 3 years ago, I've switched to an HR partner position. So I'm a senior HR partner for services, which is again a function that is across EMEA. In EMEA overall, we have more than 3,000 people and more than 500 managers, and probably most of them have gone through my courses back when I was doing L&D. And right now, I'm taking care of HR for services. And if I think about this, what has happened just recently? We obviously are now all remote managers and remote employees, right? We are also um, trying to figure out how to work from different spaces. And I'm not going to talk about this in the webinar. How do we make sure that the space is good and that you have the ergonomic chair and all this? But it is very important because I can have my experience from when we moved to the cottage here. I tried different chairs. My back was hurting, so I had to go and buy a used office chair because otherwise I don't think I would work. That's important. And of course, internet connection, we'll know that we have to figure out how do we connect with fast enough things. But I think there are a lot more, let's say, deeper and more poignant or important aspects. We are now balancing things that we didn't balance before, right? Um, I can obviously imagine my own situation easier than anybody else's situation. So my situation is that I have two small kids, and even though there's a separate room where I can work, which is also the kids' bedroom at some point in the evening, at some point during the day as well, we're now balancing these things, working, supporting the partner. If both partners are working, it's difficult. If kids are supposed to be studying and the parents are supposed to be helping them with their schoolwork, it's difficult. So we're balancing things that we've never balanced before to that degree. Plus, I think there's another aspect that's very difficult, and that's the lockdown, right? We didn't have such a strict lockdown in Slovakia, which is great. And the way that I think Slovakia is managing this is also a lot better probably than, let's say, most of the places in North America, in Canada. The parks and even the forests are closed, and so people who live in a small garsonka studio apartment, they can't even go outside. So we have the different aspects of lockdown to deal with. We have extended family in different countries, even if it's the same country but different city, and even if it's the same city, but we can't go and see them. We have to leave things in front of grandparents' house door so that they can pick up the food but not come in contact with us. That's difficult, right? And on top of that, there's the uncertain outlook. We don't know how long this is going to be. Are we going to be able to travel outside of Slovakia or not? So, of course, I'm going through this because I think all of these aspects influence how we do remote management. Yeah? And speaking about different situations, I'm saying, oh, I have two small kids, they're running around. And then I thought about it. If I didn't have two small kids, and if we were together just with my wife, but she wasn't my wife, let's say it was a fresh relationship, this could also be quite difficult, right? Because here, this is an extra stress that puts on the relationship. Or maybe you have older kids who you have to do homework with. That's completely different level. What I'm saying is that everybody has a different situation that they're dealing with, and lots of other different situations are possibly even more difficult than what I'm going through. Obviously, I mean, if I'm single and stuck uh, in a studio apartment and I can't go out, that's for me would be probably 100 times more difficult than what I do now. And of course, there's a question of introverts and extroverts. And I saw an interesting message that said, introverts, please help your extroverted friends. They don't know how to do this. The extroverts, we're not used to not meeting friends for coffee and talking. And of course, there's the other big aspect, and that is this a sprint or is this a marathon? Is this going to be soon finished? Are we going to be back in the offices? or and therefore we can maybe just hold on to it and it will finish? Or is this a marathon and it's going to be like that for next a long time and a year? And anyways, when we come back, it's not going to be the same, because in the offices we will not probably have the same amount of space. We will not be paying for the same amount of space. People will get used to working from home and so on. So what does that mean to me as a remote manager? Apart from the actual remote management skills, and I'll of course give you all the techniques, they're all proven, they work, and they're all not rocket science. So the things that you will hear are not going to be, wow, I have never thought about this. If you sat down with a glass of wine and thought about how to do remote management well, you'll probably come up with many of these techniques. But on top of the remote management skills, we also have those three aspects that are on the top of the slide. And that is, we as managers need to show empathy. We need to show that we understand that people are going through very different things and possibly very difficult things than what we are going through. Or maybe I'm going through difficult things and I want to show you that I understand. Flexibility from the point of view of, it's not a 9 to 5 working day anymore. It cannot be, because I have 2 small kids and I need to put them to bed at 2 o'clock, or I have to go and bring lunch to my grandparents or something like this, right? So there's flexibility, and then there's support in any aspect that I can as a remote manager especially during the times of COVID. I need to show support. So how does this presentation work? This presentation is based on research that we've done in Lenovo. We have a lot of people who are remotely managed, and we did a lot of research because some remote managers are really getting fantastic feedback from their teams. And we went back to the teams and said, this is difficult to be remotely managed and feel that your manager is doing a great job. What does your manager do? That's so good. And then we also went and we talked to the the managers, and said, what do you do that works? So we've gotten all of this massive information, techniques. I've structured it, and then I've been teaching this course for a while. So from years of meeting people saying, I do this also, or my manager does that, I've extended the list of techniques. So I'm going to go with you through these 5, not 6, 5 categories of what people find difficult when they are managing remotely. And first of all, it's the low interaction. I don't have face-to-face time with you, so I don't see if you're in a good mood or bad mood, right? The building of the trust, that, if I've never worked with you face-to-face, or if I don't know you very much, you're sort of a distant, fuzzy person, and I don't really have good trust for you, right? I don't feel that I really trust you much. The third aspect is the getting work done. Managers often say that I'm here, they are there, even if it's the same country, they're a different location, a different office, or in this case, in their apartment. And how do I know that they're actually getting the work done and they're working on the right things? Then getting feedback. So for example, in Lenovo right now, currently, we're going through the yearly performance reviews, which means that managers will be giving feedback to each person about their KPIs, how they're doing, what they need to improve, what they can grow in, and so on. So how do we do that? And then, since this is expected to be a marathon, not a sprint, in a bit, maybe let's say in a month and 2 months, people will get used to this completely, and they will also expect not just business as usual, meaning we will get the tasks done, but they will also expect the things that they normally expect from their managers, and that is to be developed. So how do we develop people well? The last topic is not really useful right now, but I'll send that to you in slides. You'll be getting all of these slides in PDF. Peter will share it with you. And that is, there's a set of very interesting techniques from the executives when they come and visit their team, which right now is not possible. Well, once we get to go and visit them, what do we do? How do we make sure that that visit gives the most to this remote management relationship? So I'm going to stop after each of these sections and ask if there are questions. But before that, let me just quickly take a second and ask you, is everything okay? So tell me, am I speaking loud enough? Am I not speaking too quickly? Can you see the slides? Just type in into the chat if everything is going as you would like it to go. Going well, no issues. Thank you. All fine. Perfect.
So far, so good, Maxim.
Very good. Okay, let's continue. Let's dig into the first section. So the low interaction aspect is probably the most difficult aspect, right? I mean, from interaction, I can also say that if I meet you, I know some people are easier to read, some people are more difficult to read, but I will probably, as your manager, be able to tell if you're in a bad mood or having a bad day, or if you're stressed out. I mean, it's not that difficult to tell if we're meeting face to face, but we don't have the opportunity to meet face to face anymore. And on top of that, there is one research that we've done that was quite shocking to us. I would imagine that the more senior person is, the less they would want one-to-ones because they're senior, they're more experienced, and so on. But when we try to find out what percentage of people want their one-to-ones, it came up that it's 100%. So it doesn't matter how junior or senior a person. So from a person who's just started in the company yesterday to all the way to the executives, everyone wants their own one-to-one. On the other hand, the interesting aspect is that 40% of the people are saying they don't have regular one-to-ones. Now that's a lot. Except that I think it's not really like that. And my job during this presentation is to try to show you things how managers see it and how employees see it for us managers to adjust to the way that they see it. Managers would say, but I do have one-to-ones. We talk about basically on a daily basis. We ping each other. We talk, or on a weekly basis, we have team meetings. And I know that people can ping me anytime that they have a question and so on. But that's not what people are here saying. Everybody wants their own regular one-to-one where it says Maxim and Zuzana one-to-one, where it is in my calendar, where even if there is no business, we still have that one-to-one. And if I absolutely have to move it, I would move it to a different time, but I would not cancel it. So first of all, let's talk about one-to-ones. It really should be in the calendar, Maxim plus Zuzana, one-to-one. Don't move, don't cancel, and obviously don't cancel if there's no business. And here's the reason why. It's a very simple psychological aspect. Something bothers me a little bit, but it's not enough for me to kind of use that one thing that bothers me as the main topic. And if you ask me as my manager, do you have anything? I say, I have nothing, no business to discuss. Manager says, I have also nothing, so let's cancel it. You, as a manager, will not learn about this one thing that bothers me, but it might be very important. So the point is, don't cancel, even if there is no business. Don't even ask if you have anything. Always have one-to-one, but you can cancel it earlier. And then if you see some points are in blue, those points are the things that I've added especially for Corona. I think in this current situation, we need to really agree on when the one-to-ones will happen and how often. Because if this is an experienced person with whom you've worked face-to-face before, and now all of a sudden we're in a remote management situation, and you all of a sudden tell them that let's have one-to-ones. It's going to be every week. A possible very negative side effect is that the person says, oops, I'm being micromanaged. Why is that? You know, before that, when we were working face to face, everything was okay. But now all of a sudden I have to report every week. So one aspect is how often, and I would propose this to each team member. I would say, okay, Peter, let's do one-to-ones. Look, this is a kind of a new situation for us. Let's do one-to-one every week. It's not because I want to control you or micromanage you or check on you, but this is new, right? So why don't we learn and figure out what it is that we might not need to work on, you might not need to do, and so on. Let's have the one-to-one in the beginning every week, and then we will see. And if Peter says no, that's probably too much for me. Okay, let's do it once every 2 weeks. I wouldn't do it less than every 2 weeks. And then the question is when. Normally we would do it at any time during the day, but I would ask Peter, you have kids, when is a convenient time for you? Because, you know, maybe Peter puts his kids to bed during lunchtime and needs to, tuck them in or sing them a song, or maybe whatever it is, when is good for you. And I think in this way, we're also showing flexibility for the personal situation, right? And then the second aspect is the contact. My job as a remote manager is to increase that contact anywhere from least contact, which is email, right? I write, I send, I don't know what's happening, all the way to chat, which is a bit faster, all the way to video chat, right? Sorry, all the way to call, all the way to video call. So anything that can have as much interaction as possible is better. And of course, if we're working, I have a shorter hair now because I just managed to buy a beard shaver just a week before Corona. So a couple of weeks ago, my hair was like this. So I took the beard shaver, the longest setting. I tried it on my son. It worked. I tried it on my daughter. It worked. And then my wife shaved my head. And then she said, "Do you want to shave my head?" I said, "No, no, no. You have beautiful long hair." But it's nice. But obviously, I'm not going to. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not going to dress up for the one-to-ones. So it's again my job to make sure that people know, look, you come in a t-shirt, come in golf shirt, come in house clothes. I don't care. I don't care if you put on makeup. It's not important. We need to relax the people that it's not a serious thing that they come on the one-to-one. And again, on top, there's a bit of a daily contact, meaning that I ping each person in my team, "Hey, good morning. How are you doing?" Right? Not like when you come on and you start working, you need to ping me and say good morning. To me, that's controlling, but I can ping them, say, "Hey, good morning, how's it going?" Right? And then the other aspect for low interaction is this emotional state that it's easier to figure out when it's face to face, but difficult to figure out over remote. But there are things that are let's call them remote body language, right? Now, if the person is all of a sudden not on the messenger, I mean, you might have Skype or Teams or Link or whatever it is that you use in the company, but any kind of messenger where you use, if the person is not on, or if their emails are not that he doesn't answer or she doesn't answer that often, if they speak with a quieter or louder voice than normal, if they are using words like, "Oh, this is not going to work," and things like this, all of these things might mean that they're having trouble. It doesn't mean that they're having trouble, but it might mean that they're having trouble. And I think what the main key thing for a remote manager, if there was one skill that I would say is the topmost useful skill for remote management, that is to be able to pick up on hints and ask and find out what's going on. I had a manager who was fantastic at this. We had a one-to-one. She said, "So what do you have on your list?" "I have these 10 things. There's one little issue." She goes, "What's the issue? Tell me about it." I said, "No, no, no, it's okay. Let's go through these things." "No, no, tell me what's the issue. Let's talk about this," right? Her ears were so big and so turned on and so attuned to pick up on words that could mean something like issue, problem, difficulty, something is not working, that she would always pick up on this thing and ask for more details. And for a remote manager, if there's one skill that is key, I think that is it. Being able to pick up on the hints and ask for more details. And the second aspect, clearly during Corona, is to be ready to switch to the Corona topic from work. I mean, we are normally used to going tun, 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 work topics one by one. I have never had situations where we talked about non-work so much. We would start talking about Corona, how is it going, figure out what's going on, and I would find that we've switched from business, and the first 10-15 minutes we talked about Corona. I think this is good. In this situation, it's good because it's again showing that you are flexible, that you are able and ready to discuss things that are personal, right? Especially in this difficult situation. And of course, on top of that, there are the technical aspects. Do people have good enough internet at home? If they're in their family house or a cottage, if the connection is not good enough, maybe then I need to call them back on a landline or their mobile. But if this is not a company mobile, then I have to also be very careful. I have to say, let me call you on your personal mobile just because the connection is bad. But I know that it's your personal mobile. I promise not to call that number without pinging you first or without you letting me, because I realize that's your personal number, right? If it's a company number, it's obviously okay. And again, I have to make sure that the technical aspects are good. I have to ask them because maybe they're not comfortable talking about the fact that they're in a cottage where they have to be because the kids can run around outside, but the connection is not so good. Yeah? We're going to move on to building trust. I'm going to take a short pause and ask. I know that there are no questions so far. Does anybody have a question? If you do, type it into the chat, please. Okay. Let's move on to the second aspect then. At the end of the second aspect, I will ask all of you, what have you found interesting or useful so far? Because again, I'm not saying that these things are rocket science techniques and you said, oh my God, I have never thought about this. But my job is to put all of these techniques together, remind you of things that you may have forgotten, and hopefully you'll find something that, this I haven't done, and I will start doing. So let's talk about building trust. First aspect, we can agree right away that building trust over remote management situation is much more difficult than face-to-face. That's a given. On the other hand, this Corona thing is sort of in the middle because you probably have worked with your teams face-to-face, but now we're switching to remote. So you've already built a relationship with those people, right? I've already worked with Susanna and I've worked with Peter in my team. We used to come to the office, and it's not like they don't know me, right? If they didn't know me and they joined and they have never seen me and they're in a different country and now we're doing remote management, that's even more tough. But even though I know Peter and I know Susanna, I'm just using Susanna and Peter as examples. Uh, do I know who they're in the lockdown with? Do I know if they are with their whole family? Do I know how big is their family? Do I know if they have dogs that they have to walk? Do I know if they have grandparents that they have to bring food? Probably not. So the basis of building trust are, from my perspective, two things. First of all, knowing more about each other. So if you know more about me and about my family and about my pets and so on, and what do I do, my hobbies and so on, you probably feel like I'm more of a real person and there might be some more trust between us. But then the second aspect is there are several things that as a manager I can do, and these things will ruin the trust. So even if I know the names of your family and everything, but I do those couple of things, the trust will not be there. We'll get to those things after this slide. But back to this, I think it's important that we find out how they're doing. And I remember that when I moved to Czech Republic, somebody came up to me and said, you North Americans, you're so shallow. You don't care. I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, when you ask, how are you? And I start telling you about my day and my grandmother and then my grandparents and this, you look shocked. You don't really care, do you? And of course, it's true that especially now in our international environment, and I think it's the same thing in Slovak, ako sa máš? Dobre, dobre, a ty? Dobre. Um, it means nothing. Ako sa máš or how are you? It's just the same thing as hello. Therefore, I know that if I want to get some answers, I would ask a couple of questions to show the person that I really am interested, but I'm also going to open up first. I don't mean that I will, as a manager, be crying on the call, but I should tell first about what I find difficult in this situation. Who am I at home with? Is the difficulty to find a room where it's quiet, because I know that a couple of times during the video calls, my kids have opened up that room, that door, ran in and said, Papa, Papa, let's play, right? So what it is that what I'm finding difficulty, I think I should be the first one to opening up, right? And then there's an interesting technique, not something that we necessarily want to tell employees about. I'll tell you why. But if I have a large team, if I have 3 people, it's okay. I'll remember the names of their of their pets as well. But if I have a larger team, my memory is not so good. I will not remember the names of their dogs or even maybe the names of their partner if I haven't met them. So it's a good technique to have a piece of paper and to write things down that I have, there's Peter, he has 17 children and the names of these children are this, and his wife is, the name is this, and there's a dog named Honzik, and Susanna, she has a cat, and the cat's name is this, and she has 7 brothers, and so on. I would write things down because then the next time when we're having a call, I can ask, how's your dog Honzik? And Peter says, aha, so he's actually listening, right? I want to show that I'm listening and I do care, but I don't really fully trust my memory that much. The reason why I'm saying that we don't say this technique in front of employees, because sometimes employees say, well, this is all fake and manipulation. It's not. I just simply don't remember things like this. And again, we're back to picking up on the hints and asking for more details. So if they say, well, it's a little bit difficult, what's difficult? Pick up on the words, on the hints, and ask, because people, I think in general, are not used to telling everything and giving it to you on a silver plate. They will give you a hint and they will see, did you pick up on it? Did you show interest? Did you ask? And if yes, then next time I'll give you more. And if not, then why would I tell you more next time? And then this is the category of, even if you know that my dog's name is Honzik, if you do these things badly, I don't trust you. So what happens? First of all, the admin. What could possibly be more important for me than my holidays, my expenses, because it's my money, right? And in this case, I think that there are 2 types or 2 categories of managers. Managers who approve everything that same day, and I've had a couple of those, and managers who approve, let's say, tomorrow, by the end of the week, in a month, or never. And I've seen some managers who never approve things like this. If you want to be in a category and you are on purpose choosing which category, you definitely want to be in the first category, because it's either by the end of today or everything else. So just think about if you've had managers like this. I had a manager who said, when you enter a holiday, it comes to me, of course, into my inbox, but I may miss it. So please ping me, tell me that you've requested a holiday, and I'll make sure that by the end of that day, maybe not during the day, but in the evening, I will approve it and we will take a look at it. And people say, wow, that's building trust. The other aspect is clearly getting on calls with the person on time. So if I have a call with Peter and it's 1-to-1, and we get on call, but I come 5-10 minutes late, and I explain that I'm sorry, I had a quarterly review with, and I give a name of an executive, and it sounds important, and Peter says, okay, well, I get it. That first time, okay, but then the second time I come in late, and the third time, by the third time, I guarantee you that Peter knows Maxim just doesn't really care. I mean, Maxim comes late because I am somewhere way below the middle point of what's important, right? And how can we possibly build trust in that situation? So of course, if I have to be late, I will ping Peter and say, listen, I'm sorry, I'm late, just running over, let me ping you. Don't come on the call, don't waste your time. I'll ping you once I'm done. Or, of course, the other aspect is to come on the calls on time, at least every second call. The other aspect about building trust is being able to talk about things in private, which means that in a regular office situation, if I'm remote manager and the person is working in an office, it's very important that they get a quiet room or sort of a phone booth or something like that. It's interesting that 60% of the people say that they're not able to find a quiet meeting room, which I think is not true. I think that they're just not able to find a meeting room that's quiet at that moment, because if we're having one-to-one and I ask Peter, are you in open office? Yes, of course. I don't want Peter to talk to me about private things in open office or even regular business things in open office, because he might be uncomfortable. So I want him to be in a quiet room. He looks around left, he looks around to the right, and he says, okay, there are no meeting rooms. That's why as a remote manager, I always ask them to please pre-book the meeting room in advance, and then there's no problem. But in the current situation, it could be even more difficult, right? Because finding a quiet room or a quiet corner of the room while the kids are playing could be difficult. Now, this is my office during the day, but it's the kids' bedroom during the night. And if the kids have to go to sleep during the day, sometimes I'm on calls and my son is sleeping in the bed here, and I need to find out from the employee when can we have that quiet time so we can have a more trust building or more open one-to-one. And then the other interesting statistics, this is interesting from the point of view of how managers see it versus how employees see it. You have 80% of the managers who say, yes, we have dealt and we have helped our subordinate with personal issues and problems. And then the employees say, well, in 30% yes, in 20% no, and in 50% well, only if it's necessary, which I think is great because it shows that the managers, we always exaggerate things. We tend to put more importance into things. I've dealt with the employee's issue, and employee says, what issue? It was the fact that I needed a day off because my son was having a football game and I wanted to go there. That's not issue. That's an admin thing. That's normal. And we think that we've helped them with something personal. So we need to make sure that we actually find out what do we need to do? What do they need help with? And then back to this empathy, flexibility, and support. Empathy is when I show that I'm actually curious what you find difficult, and that I tell you what I find difficult, and we discuss how do you deal with the new corona situation. Flexibility is asking when can we have the meeting. If you ping me and say, listen, I'm sorry, I can't have this one-to-one because I have to go right now and buy milk and we're out of milk. Okay, that's fine. Let's move things. And then support finding out anything that you need and seeing if, for example, people would want to take holidays once a week, right? So I still try every week, every second week, to take Wednesdays off because that breaks up the week. It makes it easier for us as a family to handle two kids. I know that I'm going to be missing some holiday days later on in July, but okay, I'm not sure that we'll be going anywhere anyways. And since this is a marathon, I want to make sure that we survive well, and so that it's something that we don't go crazy about now, and not that I have tons of holidays left and still not feeling well. So all of these aspects are about building trust. And then as for also from the point of view of building trust in a team or in team calls, what used to happen is that most of the people would have the majority of the team, let's say 7 out of 10 people in the office sitting around the table, chatting, joking, especially if they're all native speakers or speakers of one language. People are making jokes, and then 3 people are joining over the call, feeling completely out of place, not understanding the jokes, not hearing things that well, and clearly not part of the team. Now, Corona has made it all flat, so we're all joining through the phones, and we are all there on the same rules, let's say, which is great. But that means that the remote manager has to put on a hat of a facilitator, which means that it's my job now to make sure that I pull in all of the people in my team. And if I have a large team, then I will make a drawing of all the people with their names, and I'll put a check mark that I have pulled in Zuzana, but I haven't pulled in Peter yet. And Peter is quiet, by the way, so I know that I need to do a little bit more work and involve him, right? So I'm now facilitating during the team calls, again, in order to build trust. And the other aspect, and that's especially for Corona, do we start somehow differently? And I've seen people do it in 2 different ways. Either we start light, so people have shared funny pictures or they tell funny stories about life under Corona, how in Czech Republic people can only go for a walk if they have a dog, and how they share that same dog in the whole building, and the poor dog gets walked 75 times a day, whatever, and people laugh, right? So either you start light or you actually start more personal. It's exactly the opposite. So how are you doing? What's difficult? And again, I'm ready as a manager to share what's difficult for me. But I think it is our job to make sure that we do these things and not just jump right into the business. So let's move on to the third aspect. But before we move on to the third aspect, please open your chats and write down what's the one technique that you found that's useful so far. It's interesting for me because usually people find completely different techniques useful, which is great because it means that somebody finds something and everybody finds something, and I'm giving you a wide enough choice. What do you find useful? Please, in the chat.
Maxime, also in the meantime, we see that we are getting some questions as well from our audience.
Yeah, the question about external relationships.
Yep. Yeah, this is a question from Ernest Salzer of CSI Leasing, member company of AmCham.
Great. I think that if the relationship now all of a sudden is remote, which means that I used to meet with my clients face to face, we would go for lunch, for coffee, and now it is only remote, then I think a lot of these techniques would work. I would probably expect that as a client, so if I'm your client and you gave me a call and you started really opening up to me, that might be a little bit strange. In a team, it's less strange, but I would still, as in the discussion with an external client, talk about how I'm dealing with Corona. Again, being very sensitive not to overburden or not to cry on their shoulders, of course. But I think it is important to build trust with the clients. So sharing about Corona and your situation and asking questions and picking up on the hints is a great way to build trust also with the clients as well. Back to my question, please. If you can, type in one thing that you found so far useful. Show me your favorite painting on your wall in your room, please. Great. It is true that it's been very interesting to see the backgrounds or behind the video calls. You get to see inside their apartment. You get to see the cool stuff that they have on their walls. Opening of the call for everyone, not just for the people that they were joining earlier. Okay. Okay. So basically, if I understand correctly, pulling people in, even for the people who joined later. Is that correct? Yeah. Understand. Yep. Thank you. What else did you find useful so far?
Maxim, can I also have a question while people type their observations? I somehow like the idea about emphasizing the empathy in the managerial work. And this is not a very common feature of Slovak managers so far. Excuse me for if if I touch upon anybody, but this is my observation so far, that not so many managers are capable of expressing their feelings and are not capable of making them able to jump into others' feelings, right? So empathy is pretty important. How do you ensure as someone who is supposed to be managed by a manager, when you see that your managers are not showing enough empathy, what are your tools how to show them that, hey guy, it might be a good idea to show more empathy? Is there any useful tool that you might recommend to our participants?
I think you're asking a different, interesting question from a different perspective. As an employee, how do I pull my manager into being a little bit more open? Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
I think that again, managers need to understand that this is part of our job, right? Not just to go and do the business calls and go down the list of business topics, but it's also our job to pull in people. And I think that's a great perspective, that if employee will start sharing a little bit, but obviously as employees, we will not share repeatedly. If the manager right after I say that it's kind of actually difficult because this and this and that. And the manager says, okay, and now let's take a look at what we have on our business list. It's difficult to continue doing it. So as an employee, I think it's very, I don't know if the word courageous is correct at this moment, but it's great if the employee pushes a little bit once or twice. But I mean, at some point it will be enough and say, okay, well, I get it. You, Mr. Manager, Miss Manager, don't want to discuss things that are more oriented, and okay, let's move on, fine. But then at this point, also manager cannot expect that employee will be really open with them, right? So I think it's good to push a little bit once or twice. Put it this way.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much.
And we have someone writing that the partner or the children of my colleagues waving when passing by during our video call. Yeah, I think that's great. And I've always thought about what am I going to do if that happens, right? And then obviously the more video calls you do, the higher the chance. And it did happen a couple of times that either the door opened and I think you just make a joke out of it and you wave to the kid and you say, Papa is on the call right now, and that's it, right? No need to make it into anything big and serious. In fact, it's funny. That's what it is. It's funny. Okay, let's move on to getting work done. So in a regular remote management situation, most problems come from unclear expectations, which means that if we were in a regular remote employment where I would ask a manager and say, do you have any rules about how this remote thing works? Most of the time, the managers would say, yes, I have a simple 17 points on my list, and everybody I'm sure knows about it. If you ask the employees, say, what are the rules of how you cooperate together? They will say, I don't know, right? So most of the time, it's unclear expectations. So I would strongly recommend that in regular situation, a manager sets up clear rules, meaning that, look, I'm driving between 8 and 9 a.m. every day from home to office, which means that during 1 hour, I will give a brief. I will do a brief call with each one of you. We'll do kind of a strategic meeting about what you're concentrating on today or how is it going and so on. If I write you an email and request something from you, I don't need you to right away answer, but let's agree that by the end of the day, you will always answer to me. And that if you ping me and I'm busy, I will always ping you back by the end of the day. Things like this, a list of expectations and rules that we have established. In this case, I think we're back to flexibility and empathy because we need to agree on the time of the day. When is it good? But we still need to set up those rules. So if you haven't done that, now is a good time still to, even if it's 2 weeks later, say, by the way, listen, I've gone to this training. There was some Canadian guy who was doing a training and he brought up a lot of weird ideas. But one good idea is establish a rule. Let's establish some rules. I really don't care and I don't mind if you use me as an excuse after this training, because if you tell people that you go on a training and you come up with some weird things and you blame the trainer, it's always easier for you, and I'm happy with that. Go for it. So just say, I've heard some weird ideas, let's try this. Yeah? And again, being flexible and pinging each other, so I know that if you ping me and I'm busy, I will always ping you back, maybe not right away, but by the end of the day for sure. And here's a great technique for making sure that the proper work is being done. Paradoxically, it's a technique that I used to teach high potentials and key talents, because usually key talents are overworked, right? Who do you give more work to? Lucy, who is fantastic, or to Jimmy, and Jimmy is sort of not so good? Of course, I give it to Lucy because I don't have to explain to her. And the next topic comes up, Lucy, Jimmy, I can teach Jimmy, or I can just give it to Lucy, I'll give it to Lucy. So Lucy as the key talent is quite often overworked. So when I used to do trainings for Lucy's, I would say, here's a great technique. At the beginning of your one-to-one, before you get into all of the topics, you say, dear manager, Zuzka, let me walk you through the things that I'm working on, right? And Zuzka, as my manager, might be kind of surprised. Why do I want to do it? But there are big benefits. If I tell you the 10 things that I'm working on, and you're my manager, first of all, you will see that I'm working already on a lot, which, by the way, gives me an opportunity to negotiate, because if you want to add the 11th thing, I will say, okay, that's great, but which of these 10 can I take off the list? And I think that's a fair negotiation point. The second aspect that happens is that you'll find out that I'm working on points number 6, 7, and 9, which you don't actually need me to work on, but I didn't understand or didn't realize that. So you can say, oh, whoa, because of Corona or because of this or because of that, number 6, 7, and 9, you can take off your list. Don't do it right now. Let's put it on hold. Yeah? And then the other aspect that you will get to see is my prioritization, because once I go through those lists of 10 things, you can ask me, can you tell me what are your top 3 priorities? And even though there are lots of trainings on how to prioritize, in reality, I think there's only one way to learn to prioritize properly, and that is that I sit down with my manager every day, I show her what I'm working on. She asks me about my priorities, I show her my priorities. She says they're wrong, she corrects me, the next day I can figure out better what is the priority according to her, and then I can adjust. So that's the only, in reality, way to learn. Now what I'm saying is that as a remote manager, use that technique, but you do it. You open up the call and say, right, walk me through the whole list of what are you working on. And then, of course, there's the other aspect, and that is assigning tasks. Now, this is interesting because I'll show you some statistics, but people always think that they assign tasks well. In reality, most of the people, most of the time, assign tasks badly. So they do something like, well, I want you to put together an Excel. Over here, there will be this and this and this and this. On the side, it will be this and this. Do you understand? The answer is always going to be, of course, yes, I understand. Because either the person doesn't want to admit that they don't get it, or they think that they get it. So there is no better technique. I've never found anything better than this. I turn that around. I say, listen, I've explained it to you, but I'm not sure that I explained it well. Can you walk me through how did you understand it? And if you start explaining to me what you got from my explanation, right away I will see, did you get it or not, or did I obviously do a bad job? And say, okay, I did a bad job explaining. Let me explain better. By the way, there are 2 ways to do this. Walk me through it so that I can see if you're smart enough to get it. That's not a good way to do it. Walk me through what you understood, because I'm not sure that I explained well. That's a better way to do it, obviously. But on top of that, anything that you can do to show what you want. So if you want some sort of an Excel, draw it, take a picture, send it to WhatsApp of your employee. Zuzka, I've just drawn it for you. I've sent it to you. That's what I want. Show examples, show pictures, show from last year, the similar report, whatever it is, just show more than explain. And then there's back to the body language. What's interesting, and again, it doesn't mean this. It could mean it. It doesn't have to mean it, okay? But if you ping something that is not important, or you email something that is not important to Peter, so I say, Peter, when you have a chance, can you please send me the names of the 5 people who came to the meeting with you? And Peter right away in 30 seconds writes it back to me. Could be that he is so overloaded and he has so many things to do and he doesn't know what to start that, aha, an email from my boss comes, I should answer right away. It could be also the opposite, that he has nothing to do, so he gets on it right away. What I'm saying is it's a body language that is a remote body language, and just like with everything else that's remote, it could mean that Peter is overloaded. So I will check the next time and I'll say, hey, Peter, walk me through what are you working on? Let's see how much do you have on your plate. Now some interesting statistics. So obviously, none of the managers think that they explain in a way that employees do not understand, but actually a quarter of the employees say, we don't understand the way that our manager assigns the tasks. And again, very few managers think that there are things on the employee's workload that they're not aware of. But employees, a third of the employees say, my manager does not know all the things that I'm working on, is not aware, and therefore might think that I'm obviously not working hard, but I'm working very hard. So before we move on to getting feedback, I'll give you some techniques, and then the last topic will be developing team. Do you have any questions? If you do, then type them into the chat. I'll take a second break and answer questions or move on. Looks like I'm doing well-placed advertising for Kofola.
It's okay, Maxim. Kofola has not.
Kofola has not joined AmCham?
Has not yet joined. Yeah.
Oh, you should take a screenshot from this. This is, look, this is the reason why you should join AmCham.
Precisely.
Okay, no questions so far, so let's go into the next topic, getting feedback. Now, I want to say that in the situation where you need to get feedback on your employees in order to give them, let's say, this once a year or once every 6 months, the performance feedback that you give, it's very important to ask others, right? I really like this expression, by the way. It sounds quite serious, but it's to overcome the tyranny of distance. And it's true. The bigger the distance, the more difficult it is for me to do things, right? Now, in remote management, it doesn't really matter except for when you have a call from America and to China. So the American colleague is in the morning, Chinese colleague is in the evening, and obviously we are in EMEA, so in Europe we're in the middle of all of that. But it's our job as a manager to overcome that tyranny of distance, which means that I would like to ask peers for feedback on Zuzka. Now, there's a couple of details that are important to mention here. First of all, if I'm the kind of manager that asks any feedback from Zuzka's peers, I'm already in a minority, in a tiny minority of good managers, because most managers simply don't do it. So I'm going to show you how to do it well, better, and best. But if you already ask, that means you are already in the tiny minority of people who do it, and it's great. Obviously, though, if I'm going to be asking feedback from peers, then I need to tell Zuzka first, because what I don't want to happen is that Honza gets off the call when he gives me feedback on Zuzka, and he pings Zuzka, says, hey, your manager just called me and asked me for feedback on you. Did you know this? Zuzka says, no, I'm surprised. And obviously, psychologically, we tend to interpret things in a negative way. So if somebody is asking for feedback, they're probably asking, what am I doing wrong? Not what am I doing well, right? So asking for peer input is great. Telling Zuzka that I will be asking is important. Asking Zuzka, who should I ask? Who are the people that you work with the most? Who are your colleagues? Who are your internal clients? Who are your external clients that you work with the most? Give me names, and then there's always, it's a good idea to have a second step saying, okay, but these people are probably the people that you work well with. Who are the people that you don't work well with? Because I want to include them in the list as well. People don't naturally include them in the list. And then not forgetting to ask the positive thing. What does Zuzka do well, right? But here we go. If you do ask, here are 3 levels. And by the way, even the basic one is great. But the basic one sounds like this. What do you think about Zuzana? The intermediate level, the better level, is what do you think Zuzana should do more or less of? And the absolute best way of doing it is Zuzana's KPIs are this, this, and that. Based on the KPIs, what do you think she should do more or less of? And I'll explain why is that last one better. That last one is better because whatever feedback I get from Honza, I can right away without any changing, manipulating, copy pasting, whatever. I can use that directly to Zuzana because it will be directly connected to the KPIs. So it's easier for me to do it. The other technique, and this is a great technique, I've seen managers write to their internal clients and to their and to their colleagues and so on, saying, we are coming to the time of mid-year review. Please write an email to my manager, not to me, but to my manager. And I'm putting my manager on copy, by the way, right? Please write an email to my manager and give her any feedback that you might have on me, because we work together a lot. She should get the feedback, both what you like and what I should do differently or what I should stop doing. That's a great technique, and that should come from anybody. Again, the technique here is don't write email with your feedback to me. Write the email with your feedback to my manager. So we move on to the next level, next last topic, and that is the development of the team. Before we move on, any questions so far? Questions, comments? Don't start writing everyone at the same time, please.
Maxim?
Yeah.
Excuse me. How often do you consider is it correct to ask for feedback to your peers? How often should you be the one, driving the necessity to get feedback?
I think that it should be done at least every 6 months. I know that there are companies where it's normal that it's done once a year. In my opinion, especially with my limited tired memory, normally when you evaluate someone, you would anyways evaluate the last month. You don't remember what happened even 6 months ago. And 1 year ago is so far away. So I would say that there should be a full review about the person's uh, performance when you as my manager sit down with me and say, let's look at your KPIs, or let's look at the things that you expect me, I expect you to do. These are 3 things: drinking 10 bottles of water a day, chopping down 17 trees a week, and putting together a report every month. Let's talk through each of the KPIs, and you as an employee, you tell me what you think about how you're doing in each of these, and then I'll tell you what I think, and we can negotiate and we can discuss. And I think that has to happen at least every 6 months. And I think that there are other more practical techniques of how to do this performance evaluation well. But I think 6 months, 3 times a year is even better. It's only because I don't remember, right? I don't remember what happened more than a month ago, usually, right? Does that answer your question, Peter? Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you. And one more thing, if I may, that is coming to my mind is a question regarding the one-to-ones between a manager and an employee. I know a manager, it's also guys from AmCham member companies. He has set up a weekly one-to-one reviews with his 12 members of his team, and he would love to spend half an hour with each of them every week. And sometimes it happens that simply the employees have nothing to share, nothing to talk about, and so on and so forth. And even the guy insists on having that half an hour available for them. And even if there is a silence, he remains available during that half an hour to those employees. He wants to make sure that the employees have enough and equal treatment in all of these respects. Do you find it as a interesting tool, or would you maybe add something to that from your experience?
Thanks for putting me on the spot. Now, if that person is on the call, he's going to kill me if I answer that it's not a good idea.
He's not. The guy is not on the call.
That's okay. No, I think that there are aspects of this that work, right? I mean, the fact that everybody has the same opportunities and that it's a level playing field, that everybody has a half an hour. I think it's great that if you do have these one-to-ones, that we don't cancel them, but we say, hey, do you have anything to discuss? We still do the personal stuff, right? And then we would cut it short, let's say after 10 minutes. That makes sense. I think that in many cases, having a one-to-one weekly with your team is good because the team members might have questions, or I might have questions. So it's good to have that time booked, but I don't have to have it the whole half an hour if we don't need to, right? But on the other hand, I think it's also a question of seniority. If I have very junior people in my team, then weekly one-to-one half an hour is great because I'm there to answer any question that they have. If I have super senior people and they simply don't need help from me, it still could be good because they know that I'm there to support them. But maybe for these people, it's enough that we have such level of cooperation that I would say, if you have questions, just ping me. And they say, okay, we'll do it, right? So I think it's a question of experience, and especially not general experience, but how experienced are they in the tasks that they're doing right now? Because I could be very experienced, but now I have a completely new task. In this task, I'm not experienced. Therefore, I would love to have one-to-one when you teach me how to do it, because you know what you're doing and I don't.
But I guess the issue of trust is also stepping into the picture, because if you as a manager, if you relied on me, and if it is okay for you, just Peter, ping me whenever you feel it's necessary. Otherwise, we don't have to spend every week half an hour. That's also quite kind of high level of trust between the two of us.
It is. It is also like we're saying that in this case where we work together very well, and we didn't have anything really set in stone, and now all of a sudden during Corona, you want to have a one-to-one every week. For me, as an experienced person, that might a little bit it might stink of micromanaging, right? But back to again the super useful statistic that I showed right in the first slide. 100% of your people will want one-to-one, something that says that Peter and Maxim one-to-one, and it doesn't have to be weekly, it could be monthly, but I want that space to be mine, and I want you not to cancel it, and I want you not to cancel it even if you have no business to discuss, right?
Understand. Thank you so much for both answers. We have a comment from Ernest as well, that it's a great idea, great feeling to have a mentor at your side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mentoring is great, especially when a mentoring program is set up in a way that everybody understands the expectations. I don't think we have time to get into that, but I've set up several different mentoring programs as part of my development courses and as part of different groups. And it's always, I think, an exam. It's important to set the expectations so people know what they're getting into. As much mentors as mentees, right? Because mentors might have completely different expectations. Okay, let's get into this last topic of developing the team. So we've worked together in a remote environment for a while now. The first wave of, oh my God, this is weird, has gone off. It's not only about being effective and productive, because I am already effective and productive, everything is good. Now we're sort of back to normal. And when it's normal, every employee expects that the company and the manager will develop them. Now, to the point where I sometimes think, well, wait a second, your expectations are unrealistic. It's you who needs to, as an employee, show me that you are interested in development, and then I will help. But lots of people expect that it's actually the company that basically owes a development to every person. So what does that mean? I think, and this is why it's so interesting for me to do this last bit. I've done learning and development, management development for 15 years. And for me, it's always a surprise. And this is, it's an amazing surprise that it's not so much about development, it's about the feeling of development. Let me explain to you what I mean. You have a one-to-one with me, you're my manager. We discuss operational things. We also discuss some improvements that I can do and so on. I walk out of the office and my colleague says, what was that meeting about, Maxim? And I say, I don't know, it was a regular business one-to-one when we did, regular stuff. Then as a manager, you failed. Because even if you helped me improve and helped me grow and helped me figure out something that I didn't know before, but I walk out there and I have a feeling that this was a regular meeting, it's a failure. Because what's important for people is that they have a feeling that they're being developed. Now, I'm not saying that it should be a BS feeling, just fluffy feeling with nothing. But what I'm saying is, even if there is development, but I didn't notice that I've been developed, that's worth nothing. So what I'm trying to say is there is a technique that will definitely help me get the feeling that my manager is helping me grow. This technique has two parts. First of all, don't mix discussing development, career growth, and regular business. It is not possible. I mean, some people say it's possible, some people do it. My suggestion is don't do it. Have a separate meeting in the calendar where it says Peter and Maxim one-to-one development. Do it every 2 months, 3 months, and do not mix the regular business stuff in there. Of course, we still do personal in the beginning, but then we say, look, today is only about development. So that's first aspect of how do you give me the feeling that this is something special. The second is asking these 3 powerful questions. I have never seen any better, more powerful, simple techniques. And these questions are silly, and I can guarantee you that people will not know the answers to. So what does that mean? The first time that Peter comes to my development discussion with him, I'm going to ask him, Peter, what's the biggest success that you've had since our last one-to-one 1 month ago? And Peter will not have the answer, so I am prepared. I have the answer for him. I say, Peter, if you remember, you had that meeting with a difficult client, and in the beginning, the client came in and sort of was not aggressive, but very defensive about anything that you had to offer. But you pulled them in and you asked them what they needed and you opened them up, and then it was a very productive meeting. So that, from my point of view, that was a big success. And Peter says, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But also Peter's thinking, hey, look at this. Maxime is actually noticing the good things that I do. So then we move on to the second question. What was the biggest mistake or obstacle that you made, again, over the last month? And again, if Peter doesn't have an answer, and most probably Peter will not have an answer because these are weird questions. People are not really used to coming up with answers right away. They need some time to prepare for this. And they didn't have time. So if he doesn't have an answer, I will again have an answer ready. Well, from my point of view, you had that one client with whom you did a very good meeting, first meeting, and then it took you 2 months to send the offer that you've said, that you've agreed that you'll put together. That's a really long time. That's a mistake. I think you have a tendency to do great meetings but not follow up through. Yeah. So again, the third question, what's the most useful thing that you learned or understood? Maybe I'm not able to prepare the answer for that, but I'm teaching Peter that I will be asking these questions. And again, these questions are weird. They are coaching questions. Peter might not have the answer, and that's okay. So therefore, I tell him the next time we do a one-to-one that is for your development, please get the answers ready. And I might even email it to him the day before and say, get these answers ready. If we come to the second time, and by the way, it's very possible that Peter will not have the answers. So I will again have the answers the second time. But if it's a third time and Peter is not ready, I'll say, Peter, let's stop. Let's meet again tomorrow, have the answers ready, and then we have more to discuss. Because these questions and preparing the answers for the questions will definitely give Peter the feeling that I am being developed. And that's what I want. I want him to understand that it was a developmental discussion. We talked about skills. We talked about what he can do better. We talked about how he can do better. He walks out of the room and somebody asks him, what was that? That was a developmental discussion. We talked about improvement. That's good. So these 3 questions are great. And then obviously there is the aspect of recognition that we cannot forget. And that is really not rocket science. You don't need to read a thick book about recognition. Recognition and praise is simple. I have Peter. He did a good job. I have also my manager, so Susanna, who is VP. I ask Susanna to help. Maybe I don't even need to ask Susanna to help. I write to Peter, Peter, you did a great job, and I put Susanna in copy. Peter opens the email, sees Susanna in copy, says, ooh, that's nice. If Susanna is very good at helping, then maybe what I can do is I can pre-write an email and send it to Susanna and say, Susanna, can you please send that to Peter? He did a great job. Just put me on copy. And he gets that praising email, but not from me, but from my boss. And that's even more powerful, right? We're talking about also sending some Christmas cards, birthday cards. I mean, it's absolutely okay on a team call to say, hey, today it's Susanna's birthday. We obviously don't talk about the year, right? That's not appropriate, but we are okay to talk about people's birthday. Or ask people at the team call, is it okay that we celebrate people's birthday? Christmas cards. Who has ever in the last 10 years gotten an actual handwritten business Christmas cards. I know remote managers who wrote those by hand Christmas cards, and now it's easy because you just put in everybody's home address and people get it and say, wow, that's impressive, right? And again, then there's an aspect of awards. I think that even local managers don't know all of the awards that are available, because we usually have the awards from the region, the awards from the site, the awards from the VP, the awards from this and that. Right? And it's our job as a manager, which actually from HR point of view, it's always interesting for me that it's not happening. It's our job as a manager to squeeze out the most possible award recognition for my people, if they obviously deserve it. I'm not going to put Zuzana up for an award when she didn't do anything. But if she did something that's good and I'm able to squeeze some award for her, that's what I should be doing, because we don't do enough of recognition. Now, some interesting topics about, or some interesting statistics about career. It's interesting that almost half of the people say that they didn't discuss their career plans. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. It could be that the manager discussed the career, but the employee didn't notice that they discussed the career. That could also be the same as we had a development discussion. No, we didn't have a development. That was just regular business discussion. It's my job to discuss the career with my team. Now, here's the interesting part, and this is the last technique that I'm going to tell you. As a manager, I can imagine that from the position that Peter occupies, there are 5 different directions or paths that Peter can go. He could become more of an expert in what he does. So basically become more of a subject matter expert, deeper subject matter expert. He could go into the management part, which is basically what I'm doing, and I'm not going anywhere. So this path is sort of closed. He could also rotate and do the same kind of thing, but in a different department, and that would be department A, and it's the same analytical, statistical things that he's doing for me, but doing in a different department. He could rotate to a completely different thing, but these are the 2 other things that usually people go to. Point is, as a manager, I can probably imagine 5 different paths that Peter can go to, and in some cases, these paths are even closed in my company. They don't exist. That's okay. Or taking over my job, I'm not going anywhere and Peter's not ready yet, so that's not immediately open. But the interesting thing is, if you ask Peter, say, Peter, what paths can you possibly take? He'll probably be able to come up with only 3. As a manager, I can always see more different paths. And what could be possibly better that when we discuss the career, I tell him about those 5 paths. Even the paths that are in general open but not available in my company. It's still good to be transparent and say there is this path, but it doesn't exist in our company. But also what I can do is these two other paths doing a similar thing but in a different department. I found out who does it in those departments. Here are their names, and if you want, I will ping them and ask them, would they have a half an hour call to talk to you about what they do, because maybe that's something that is interesting for you in the future. Because I know that if Peter is interested in something new, yes, of course, I'd love to have him in my team because he's good, but he's going to leave anyways. And if he can rotate to the other team, then we get to keep him at least for the company. And if he can rotate to the other team, but he can first agree with me and with this other person in the other team that he will learn for the first 6 months, then he actually gets to stay in my team for 6 months more, and while learning at the other topics, and then switch over. It's a win-win situation. So last topic, and that is when you're doing an interview and you are interviewing somebody for a remote management position. And one of the questions you say, so you ask them, so how is it for you to work as part of the team and cooperate with others? And they say, I love working with others. I love cooperating. Working together in a team is exciting for me. I love bouncing around ideas. And this is going to be a purely remotely managed position, which right now all of them are, but yeah. If that person is like that, then don't give them the job. Because if they find that working with others is so important for them, and it's super important, and they have never done remote work before, then you're setting them up for a failure. So you could actually ask them, okay, I can see that it's very important for you to work in a team. Have you worked in a remote team before where you do not meet face to face with anyone? How did that work for you? Okay. I'm happy to share this slide with you. You'll get it, I'm sure. I'm also happy to hear your ideas and techniques. I'm going to ask one last question. We have 5 minutes, and that's the famous question of what did you find useful? Which technique did you find interesting? So if you can, please write down what's the one thing that you found out. If you have questions, we'll open it up, and we have still 5 minutes. I'm happy to stay another 10 minutes if you would like, if you have questions. And otherwise, thank you very much for being part of this webinar. Peter, let's see what we have here.
Yeah, it's a thank you note for you from Slavo Ciprich. I think that he has to leave to another meeting starting at 3.
Okay.
But yeah, we have three Qs. Thank you as a
Okay. Yeah, those 3 questions are very useful as a technique. Yep. What else did you find interesting or useful? Come on, guys. There's 17 of you. By the way, I understand that there are men and women on this call. Come on, guys, is something Canadian, but I am able to, from the name, sometimes tell who is a man, who is a woman. But what else? What else did you find useful? Getting work done part was very useful. Thank you. Okay, Peter, why don't we do one thing? Why don't we stop the recording and then open up the audio channel? So maybe without the recording, people will also be a little bit more comfortable asking questions. So let's stop the recording and see if there are any more questions.
We will stop recording for the moment.